to Kapow, where we review comics, cartoons, and collectibles. I'm Sonya.
And I'm Al. We've got a really good mix this week. We're going to be looking at Dominique Laveau, Voodoo Child, and also the Daredevil trade Father.
Yes, and Ray will be joining me later to have a look at The Illusionist, which I am looking forward to.
That's going to be great. And I'm going to be talking to Christian Reed, a local writer who's going to be making a big announcement.
Very exciting. But first, let's get on to D.B. Cooper. Okay, so this week we truly are looking we are looking at The Secret History of D.B. Cooper, issue number 1 by Brian Chirilla.
You didn't believe us. We said we would get here in the end, and we have.
It's actually oddly appropriate that this review has been slightly elusive, considering the real-life person that this is based on.
Yeah, let us tell you the true story of D.B. Cooper.
1971. A man purchases a ticket under the name Dan Cooper. He boards a commercial flight from Seattle to Portland. Halfway through, the man stands up, announces he has a bomb, and hijacks the plane.
The plane lands in Seattle. Cooper demands $200,000 in unmarked bills and some parachutes. Once they've taken off again, somewhere over the Washington wilderness, Cooper jumps out of the plane, never to be seen again.
Now, what we've just told you actually has very little to do with the comic.
True.
But
It is a fantastic true story, though.
it is. It's a very cool story. The comic itself is more of a psychedelic conspiracy theory that's set in the Cold War, where D.B. Cooper is a psychic assassin for the CIA, along with his partner, a one-eared talking teddy bear.
How this is all going to tie together with the story we just told you, we're not exactly sure at this time. What we do know is that it all takes place a week before the hijacking. Cooper is a chain-smoking smartass with a katana, and frankly, I loved him almost on sight.
Yeah, as did I.
Oh, come on, let's be honest. You love the one-eared teddy bear.
His name is Lee, and he is very cool, and yes, I did.
We jump back and forward between Cooper and a high-ranking member of the Kremlin. Cooper is negotiating his way through this creepy, visceral landscape that looks like somebody's insides.
Yeah, Chirilla has named this the Glut.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the high-ranking member of the Kremlin is having his lunch. Cooper finds a monster, gets into a fight with it, slices its head in half with his sword, and then the high-ranking member of the Kremlin's head splits wide open. Doesn't even get to finish his goulash.
No, he doesn't. Now, obviously, there are a lot of questions in this, and Chirilla does such a brilliant job of posing these questions without actually giving too much away.
Yep.
I mean, how do you psychically assassinate someone? What's with the one-eared teddy bear? And the question that has plagued FBI since 1971, who indeed was D.B. Cooper?
Look, I think this was a fantastic idea for Chirilla to actually attack this story. He was raised in Oregon, where Cooper's actually become kind of a cult icon. He's the man that got away with it. And it really does make for some very compelling storytelling.
It really does. I love seeing titles that are written and drawn by the same guy. It kind of shows that it's a bit of a passion project for them. And this one looks like it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun to read through. The artwork is sharp, great faces, amazing colours, and the monsters. I mean, this is what we've come to know Chirilla for, and it's fantastic in this. The story is confusing enough, but it doesn't get annoying.
I know what you mean. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one plays out. There's very little bad that I can say about it. I mean, I would have liked a little bit more length, honestly, but I'm still definitely going to keep reading. I mean, this is definitely a buy for me.
Me too. I think this is such an interesting project. I do understand what you're saying with it being on the slim side.
Yeah.
It is a monthly series, but the pages that are in there are absolute gold. Go out, buy D.B. Cooper. Get your hands on him before the FBI do.
Okay guys, today we're going to be talking to Christian Reed, who is a local writer. Christian, thanks for coming on to Kapow.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right, well, why don't we start just a little bit by, if you can tell us about your background, your background in comics and what you've done in the past.
I've been a writer for about 10 or 12 years now. Started out with Australian comics with a company called Phosphorescent. We did books like The Watch and Witch King. And from there I went and I worked for a little bit for Dark Horse on Star Wars Tales.
Yeah.
Took a bit of a break. I went and worked on computer games for a while. And a few months back, I came back with my first graphic novel with Gestalt Comics. for Eldritch Kid, which is doing pretty good. Just got nominated for Aurealis Award on that.
Oh, fantastic.
And now releasing my second series with Gestalt, which is Unmasked.
Unmasked, yeah. So this is going to be starting off with a digital release, and then looking towards getting sort of in paper later on.
Yep. Well, it came out just last week on digitally through the Gestalt Comics website, and then through Graphically, and we'll release that in issue by issue over the next few months. And then when that's all completed, we'll probably collect it or bring it out in a print run.
Okay, so look, for people who are wanting to know, wanting to look into this, because you give us a bit of a snapshot of Unmasked, what we're going to be seeing.
What we're calling a supervillain noir, and it's a story focusing mainly on Simon and Nancy, who are a married couple who used to be supervillains. Then, because they got beat up all the time, they got their heads kicked in, they retired. A few years on, they're bored. They're so bored. They got proper jobs. They're straight. They're citizens. They're so bored.
So then they've got to get back into it.
So then their old boss comes back into it. Their old supervillain leader for their little team comes back and says, I got to wait for us to make money. I got to wait for us to get back in the game. Yes, get the costumes.
Yeah.
No, we're doing proper jobs. We're going to be criminals, not villains.
Okay.
All right.
So there's a bit of a transition.
So they do it.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good. Here's the thing, is that they're not sure that they're ready to be out of those costumes. The juice for them maybe isn't just the cash. So this is a story of the tension between who you are, who you want to be.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, look, I'm sure everybody's going to want to have a look at this. So so how can we get a hold of it?
You can go through gestaltcomics.com, you can go through Graphically, the online distributor, and hopefully be in stores in a few months.
Fantastic. All right, well, everybody should definitely check that out. And look, Christian, thanks once again for being on the show.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, so we are looking at the Daredevil trade Father, written and drawn by industry legend Joe Quesada, with inks by Danny Mickey and paint by Richard Isanov.
Yes.
This is a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, beside being a serial killer mystery and a bit of a superhero throwdown, this is also quite a detailed character study of Daredevil himself, and actually is quite a personal story to Quesada about how we kind of grow to live up to our parents whilst also trying really hard not to turn into them.
Right, yeah. And it's interesting when there's that much writing on a story, when there's that much going on, whether it weakens or strengthens it, it can get a little bit fractured in Father. It's pulling you in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, Matt Murdock as Daredevil has pretty much wiped Hell's Kitchen clean of criminals, and as a result is going a little bit crazy with boredom. He has literally nothing to do now. Then up steps a person which the press dub Johnny Sockets. He's a serial killer who cuts out the eyes of his victims.
Yeah, and you know, if that was all that was going on in this story, if it was just Daredevil trying to figure out who this killer is, it would be still a good, tidy little story. But there's also a new group of superheroes who've moved into the neighborhood who call themselves the Santarians.
Yeah, you know what, Al? I didn't like the Santarians. Not one. Why were they there? I didn't see any point to them. It felt like they were there to fill in space and to give someone to Daredevil to fight. Like, what was their purpose? And this was written in 2005, and have they popped up since? No.
I have not seen them in anything, no. I don't think they really made an impression. But look, without them, it wouldn't really have been much of a superhero story. I mean, Murdoch probably could have done the whole thing without putting on the spandex once.
Well, true, but Quesada could have introduced an established character, someone with a little bit more interest. The Santarians were boring.
Okay. We're here to review Daredevil, though, not the
right.
Santarians. And look, I think there was a really good story here, and there was some really good art as well.
There was some great art in parts. There were some amazing panels, there's really impacting panels that almost put me in mind of like Frank Miller in his greatest days. Like, this is amazing artwork. But then it's followed up with pages of tedious multi-panel exposition, which quite frankly I just wanted to skip past. The inconsistencies of this book really got me annoyed.
Well, look, on the topic of inconsistencies, there was one thing that did bug me a lot, and that was the depictions of the press. There are these two news anchors that show up a few times, and first of all, they've got these ridiculous names. What is it?
Cotton Candy.
No, it's Candy Cotton.
No, it's Candy Cotton.
Candy Cotton and Randy for Candy. It's ridiculous. And added to which, they're talking about the actions of this brutal serial killer as if they're talking about a movie and they're actually on Entertainment Tonight. Yeah. And I see what Quesada was doing. It's very obvious that he's making a statement about news as entertainment, but the tone of it just didn't fit with the rest of the story. Everything else was quite dark, and it just, every time they showed up, they really put me off.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I loved the backstory that we got from this. You know, Daredevil's relationship to his father and how that really influenced him and shaped him so much more than a face full of radioactive isotope ever did.
Yeah.
The serial killer story is great, and the art, again, most of it's good, but it's just, there's so much in this that was wrong as well, that I just really wanted it to follow through on these moments of brilliance.
Yeah, but it did have those moments of brilliance, and I think that's something you need to focus on more. I mean, it did have some amazing artwork, some amazing panels, and there was this great serial killer story that was really well written. I mean, I went into this one really wanting to give it a buy. I really did. I love Joe Quesada, but yeah, the Centurions didn't grab me. They weren't great, and the artwork didn't stay consistently great, so it did slide over the line into being a borrow for me.
See, the story, the serial killer story, that's a buy. A lot of the panels in this, absolutely a buy. But overall, this is just a borrow and not a slip under. Like, this is a low borrow for me. I was really disappointed by this.
Look, you're not being a bit harsh?
Yes, I'm being harsh. I mean, very harsh. I love Joe Quesada. I love his body of work. I think he's a brilliant artist and writer. And reading something like this that just isn't that great, it really kind of hurt.
Are you okay?
No.
Do you want to go get an ice cream?
Yes.
Okay. What flavour?
Strawberry.
Okay.
So what have you got for us this week, Ray?
This week we checked out L'Illusionist, or The Illusionist. Now, some of you might have been lucky enough to catch this at the cinema, but for the rest of us, we'll have to make do with the recent DVD release. Now, the film is based on an unproduced, semi-autobiographical script by a French mime, director, and actor, Jacques Tati. Now, the film also stars an animated version of himself. So, it's set in 1956. We follow the story of a struggling illusionist who visits a small community where he meets a young lady who is convinced that he is a real magician.
Yes, it's quite a romantic story.
It is.
Not that it's about a couple, rather it's more the relationship between a father and a daughter.
Yes.
It could have come out a little creepy. You know, old guy rocks up, enchants young girl who then follows him to Edinburgh, but instead it kind of feels like they needed to find each other to kind of progress along.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting that they explore this kind of relationship, because instead of the predisposed contemporary view of that there's always something ominous underlying something innocent, we get something that's just beautiful and a different kind of relationship to explore, which is really refreshing.
Yes.
Now, the film is directed by Sylvain Chomet, who in 2003, some of you might remember, gave us the triplets of Belleville.
Must see, in my view.
Yes, and from me as well. But the cast is not your typical Hollywood voice sensation. Instead, Chomet chooses a stylistic choice of voice to reflect the beauty of this film, which has been created by over 80 animators.
That's an amazing amount of people working on
No,
this.
it is.
And it works out. It's such a charming looking film. I really,
Yes.
really like the style. It's almost like a picture book has come to life. I mean, we're so used to seeing animated films that are created so that they look as real as possible.
Yes.
It's really nice to come across something that's like this. And it's almost like a watercolor palette. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I thought so too. It's very much like a watercolor painting. It's very beautiful, and I'm glad you brought that thing up about the picture book, because it definitely evoked that feeling with me too. Now, I was expecting a film with more dialogue. However, the film asks you to use your own imaginations to create the dialogue for yourself. Now, this is really wonderful, but how do they do this? They basically, most of the film is told through the fading art forms of mime and commedia dell'arte and puppetry. And what this does is it creates a sensation of your childhood fascinations all over again. But it does require you to be really pay attention to the detail in it. It requires audience participation. So if you're the kind of person who wants to just put this on and switch off, I don't think it's going to be for you.
No. So at times there's only a little bit of French or Gaelic
Or
that's
gibberish.
actually heard. Or gibberish.
Yes, which is very funny.
It is. And it's not actually subtitled.
No.
So although you don't really know what's going on, you don't need the subtitles. The animation is so precise that you get it. You know what's happening.
Exactly, and that's what it reflects, is that what do you really need to tell the story? I thought that was wonderful. It's so economic, essentially.
Yes. I also like the controversy that kind of surrounds this film a little. Like, did Tati write this as an apology to his oldest daughter, Helga?
I don't know. It definitely had an apology sort of feel to it.
Yeah, but there's also the idea that he wrote it originally to be a live-action film that he indeed was going to act in with his youngest daughter, Sophie.
Yeah, well, regardless, the animated film really does pay a sort of homage to Tati. He's definitely referenced as well. Shomei is definitely respectful of him. There's a moment when the Illusionist is going into a cinema, and what is playing on the screen is the real-time action of Mon Oncle, which Tati happens to be starring in.
Yes.
But now, what did you think of the sound?
I thought it was absolutely enchanting.
It was. For me, it was like this beautiful little dance underlying the entire thing. It was really lovely.
It really was, but there was also quite haunting moments as well in it.
Yes, it does have some serious undertones. It's quite melancholic in many respects. The film strikes a fine line between the tragedy and comedy of losing hope. Now, this is the best example of that is probably through the supporting characters. You see, the Illusionist stays in a hotel which is full of these uncommissioned artists who are all struggling to make their own way through their various, art forms. Now, we've got a gymnast trio who have to work in advertising, a destitute ventriloquist who...
When I see his puppet in the window of the pawnbrokers, I actually welled up. That really upset me.
It is very sad.
It's
Did you
really
notice that
sad.
the pawnbrokers was called Brown and Blair, which
Yes.
happened to be the two former Labour PMs of England? I thought that was a very interesting choice. Okay. Then there's the clown drunk upstairs, who I couldn't help but laugh at, with the little flour on his vest as he squirts it all over his face to try and clean it.
I felt really terrible for the clown, and I'm a little afraid of them, but I did feel really bad for him. I actually breathed a sigh of relief when Alice arrived at just the right moment with a bowl of stew for him.
But we're not going to tell you about that. We won't reveal it all. But now, the film is not all gloomy. There's plenty of humour riddled throughout it, whether it be a simple observation of human behaviour or a particular character.
Like the Scottish guy.
Yes, all Scotsman.
He's hilarious.
He is, yes.
But I also loved that he had this amazing faith in Tati Chef, in his art.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I love the moment when he took the Illusionist up the hill to show him the seascape, and then he fell flat on his face before roly-polying back down the hill.
Yes. There is also actually a little Easter egg at the end of the credits with our little Scottish friend in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of little gems in this film, actually. If you keep a keen eye, you can see a number plate on a car that passes by that says FU2 Bush. And there's also the Illusionist. He's standing in the middle of the road, bracing himself toward the car lights are coming toward him, except they part ways and go past him because they're actually motorcycle headlights and not a car. Well, this is actually a reference to Buster Keaton in the 1924 film Sherlock Jr.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's also a moment in the Scottish pub. There's a character in the foreground, around about the middle of the frame, that is actually the young girl and old woman optical illusion. It's just amazing what they pack in there. So there's a lot of little gems to keep your eye out for.
Yeah.
Now, what did you think about the film in total, though, Sonya?
In total, I don't think it was quite as good as The Triplets of Belleville. I adored that film, but
Yes.
this is still a great film. I love the animation style. I like the
beautiful.
watercolor. It's such a beautiful film, and it's accessible for any age, which
It
is
is.
wonderful. So for me, I think this is a buy. I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was just charming, like I said.
Well, I almost agree with you.
Hey, come on.
Well, I don't know. I want to be able to watch it again. I want to feel compelled to watch it again. And unfortunately, although it is a beautiful film, I think it's lovely in its own right, but I also like how it pays homage to those old storytelling techniques of old. But for me, I just wanted more drive behind it. I wanted a change of pace. It felt a little too sentimental. Now, my problem is not with how Shomei told the story, but rather what the story was that he chose to tell. So for you guys at home, I'm gonna have to say borrow.
Thanks, Ray.
No worries. I'm just being fair.
I know you are.
All right.
Dominique Laveau, Voodoo Child, is a new series by Vertigo, written by Selwyn Sifu Hines. It's a story. It's about.
Don't look at me. Look, I've read this thing cover to cover. I have no idea.
Okay. All right. Let me start by setting the scene.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we're in Tremaine, New Orleans, 4 months after Hurricane Katrina, and we open with Dominique Laveau being chased by a werewolf. At least I think it's a werewolf. It's a big wolf-like creature with fangs and...
I think it's a loop guru.
Okay, let's go with that then. Anyway, so she's being chased by this thing. It's killed her friends, and now for some inexplicable reason, it wants to kill her too. Now the only way that she's actually managed to survive this is because she's discovered she has a power, so she can shoot snakes out of her head.
Yeah, head snakes. That was weird.
That was
and
weird.
Then she runs off. She finds a friend of hers who's a cop, but he can't help her because of a surprise gunfight.
Which came out of nowhere.
Yeah, completely out of nowhere. So she runs off again,
Yes.
goes to the cemetery where she finds the tomb of Marie Laveau, who some people might know was the original voodoo queen of New Orleans.
Yes.
And that's when things actually start getting really confusing, if you can imagine such a thing. This is a confusing story.
It is. I mean, this is just the first issue of a series, and I feel like Hines just wanted to throw the reader in the deep end. You know, the murder, the mayhem, the crazy, the voodoo, the just running around, which is great. You know, I like that kind of excitement, but there was no character development on Dominique enough to give me a sense of who she was. Like, why should I care if she gets stabbed or shot or eaten by a werewolf?
Loop guru.
Whatever. Like, so pedantic. Okay, I don't care about her. There's not enough personality coming off of her. I wish there was just a little bit more character development.
Well, in fairness, where are you going to fit that in? In this kind of mile a minute, like strobe effect storytelling. I mean, it's just one horrific thing after another happens in this, and the problem with that is that there's really no time to build tension. It's just boom, wolf monster, boom, gunfight, boom, creepy, dead cemetery voodoo people.
Now, why on earth she ran to a cemetery for safety? I don't know. Like, New Orleans cemetery, running away from I don't know. That's not where I would go.
No, probably
anyway,
not.
there was bits of this comic that I actually really did like.
Okay, pray tell.
I thought the artwork in this was really lovely. I thought Dennis Cowan did a really good job at kind of capturing that dark, murky, mysterious undertone of post-Katrina New Orleans.
Sure.
I thought that was really, really well done. I just wish there was a little bit more about Dominique, but the thing that it did give me is that I kind of want to know a little bit more about her.
Okay, so you're going to keep reading this one?
I think I will. At least I'll have a look at the next couple of issues.
Okay.
It kind of got me hooked just enough to just see how this is going to pan out. This is a borrow still for me. It might not be to everybody's taste, but the artwork is certainly worthwhile having a look at.
Okay, well, you know what? This is a berry for me. Look, it was just a confusing and frankly poorly plotted beginning to what I confidently predict will be a series that is best described as meh.
What's a loop guru?
Look it up. It's like a werewolf.
Why don't you just say werewolf?
What's the fun in that?
You're annoying.
You're annoying. Show up on time.
No. Well, that's us for another week.
But we will be back again next week. We'll be reviewing Pandemonium, and we'll also be taking an in-depth look at Image Comics.
Indeed. Now, is that Batman statue still up for grabs?
Yes, it is, and you can't have it. You guys are going to have to keep subscribing, following, liking us on Facebook, and it could be you that walks away with it. We are giving it
Absolutely.
away very soon.
Yes, thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.